what is that, the current year and the previous 6 years. Notice line 1 is the projected cash balance at the beginning. Line 11, the total revenues all the way across by year. Then line 24 are the total departmental expenditures by year. And then line 30 at the bottom, that's the non-contractual figures for the year. And then on the second page, I just want to point these out. I don't know that we need to have a lot or even any discussion necessarily. On item number 34, these are the contractual obligations that we have this current year and the previous years. And then line 50 are the total expenditures. Then line 52 is the projected excess revenue. We're either over or under expenditures. And then when you add, they're highlighted in yellow, when you add the projected beginning cash balance across the years there, you see that you end up with the projected ending balance. So that's just...
Dr. Tisdale, I just have a question. On line 32, you have nothing in that column. Was that moved to another category, or?
Well, no, not to my knowledge, and it may have been when you may remember in looking at insurance. I think this was based on the previous figures. I think this was for property insurance that came in at almost at the last minute. I think a week before. So you'd need to add, what is it, about roughly another 3 million, 3.6 million, somewhere in there. So again, this is just kind of to add a little context when we start looking at budgets over the years. You may find this helpful. The next document is revenue over the years. The original, which is what we approve in September, and then the actual figure is what appears in the audit. We used to call it the CAFR, Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. And you can see for fiscal year 24 where we are now, this was originally what we approved in the budget. And then to the right, you see fiscal year 2023. Well, we're waiting. We won't have that audit done likely until August or thereabouts, give or take a little time there. So you see the original budget for fiscal year 2023, and then since we don't have an actual figure, the city closes out their books. They refer to it as final figures. Typically, you'd see the final figures there, or month 13 in this case. But you can see the original, to the right of that, the original and actual figures for fiscal year 22, and so forth. So you've got several years historically there to look at if you're looking at any trends. And again, this is revenue. Then at the bottom, and I pull some of these things together strictly because I'm interested and I'm trying to look at this from a number of different perspectives, but you can see the big 3 revenue streams, and these are actual revenues, except for fiscal year 23 and 24. They're the bottom 2 lines. But you can see where our ad valorem from 2018 to 2022, it's gone up almost 2 million. And then again, we've got a final but not an actual for fiscal year 23. And the final, when the city closed its books, just a hair under 13 million. And we projected 13.8 million in fiscal year 2024. And then to the right of that, I was curious about, what do we budget for personnel? So in each department, you have a budget figure that's appropriated for the personnel in that department. So the original column is what we budgeted. For example, in fiscal year 2018, we budgeted $41,067,370. And actually, what we spent was $39,945,123. So you can see that there's a difference, which basically is money that was budgeted for personnel but was not spent. So that's just a bird's eye, 10,000-foot view there. And there could be a number of reasons why those expenditures why we didn't spend all the personnel dollars. There could be a number of reasons for that. Okay, for the next page, these are expenditures, original versus actual. So you see the top two years, fiscal year 24 is what we're in now, and 23 we're waiting on the CAFR there. But then below that in the middle of the page, you see fiscal year 22. And you see that we've kind of broken out the personnel costs, supply costs, other services and charges, contractual services, debt service, capital outlay, and non-departmentals. That's on the left. And you can see the original, for example, in fiscal year 2022, you see what we originally budgeted for each of those, what we actually spent, and then what the difference was. That percent column, that's what percent of the original column did we actually spend. So for personnel services across the board in all departments for fiscal year 22, we budgeted $43,318,301. We actually spent $42,277,810, and that equates to 97.6% of what we budgeted for personnel was what we spent. So that leaves, what, 2.4% that is represented by that $1,040,491. Okay? So that's, I just wanted to explain briefly what you're looking at there. And again, this is a number of different ways. You'll see some of these numbers repeated, but again, I'm trying to give you different perspectives on some things. Don't mean to confuse you. Trying to just give you a good frame of reference. All right, the next document is revenue on the left side by fiscal year. And you can see that revenue only is highlighted in blue. And on the right side, you see personnel expenses. So the top two, pretty much the top two tables are empty. That's because we're currently in fiscal year 24. The next column, the next row, next section down for fiscal year 23. You can see on the left side, you see property tax, what we budgeted, that's the original. Again, we don't have the, I could have used the final figures, I didn't plug them in there, or month 13. We really don't have the actual numbers yet for fiscal year 23. That probably should be in the other column. And then to the right of that, you can see corresponding that same year what each department was originally budgeted for personnel and what the actual was. Again, that's really final month 13, because we don't have the 23 audit yet. And I just wanted to point out that in the engineering department's included in public works, and you'll also notice, again, this is on the personnel side, that public safety is where they've combined the police and the fire. Okay. That's really looking at revenue and then the personnel expenditures. And I don't know, for example, on revenue, on the revenue side over the years, of course, we start with the newest year at the top, but we budget a little more in revenue for each year, whereas on the right side, under personnel, we budgeted a little more for personnel as well. So we've seen that what we budgeted for personnel increase as the revenue is increased. Okay. Now this next document, and I'm not a CPA, I just put this together because I'm interested. But I know we often get a lot of questions about how much we pay for insurance and so forth. So in the CAFRs annually, I found a page titled Internal Service Fund Employee Medical Claims, and that's what we're looking at here. So you see across the top, I've identified the fiscal year for you. Again, we're in the current year, 2024, and we don't have the 2023 audit, but you could see that the charges for services, that is insurance billings, across there on that first line, then COBRA contributions, which varies from year to year based on personnel circumstances, people leaving us usually, then interest income, which doesn't amount to much, and then the total operating revenues. So if I understand this correctly, this is what we're contributing, what the city contributes to pay for employee insurance, our portion. Then the operating expenses, you see insurance and reinsurance, and then claims expense, and then you see the pink line there. So the total operating expenses, there are that pink line all the way across over the years. So you can see that over the years, our total operating expenses have gone from 6.8 million to, in fiscal year 22, almost 9.4 million. So these are dollars that most employees don't see, that of course we have to provide for their insurance at the rate that we do. So these are additional costs for each position besides the salary for each employee. Then the operating income. And that's the difference between the green line and the pink line. So in this case, since it's bracketed in parentheses, you can see the last 4 years, there's been an operating income loss. So who makes up that loss? It comes out of the general fund. So again, whenever you pull money out of the general fund, which is what we can spend at the council's discretion once we approve the budget, we're pulling money out of the general fund for the past several years to cover insurance costs because we're self-insured. In other words, put it bluntly, we're paying out more than we're collecting, what the city plans for and what the employees pay for. And currently they're paying 8%, as I recollect. And by the way, it's a good time. I want to remind Kenny and George that we have an insurance meeting tomorrow at 1:30 with Cy. We're going to get some updates there on employee insurance there to help us make some decisions and move forward. Okay, the next page, this is the city's schedule of contributions to PERS. So, of course, the employees contribute and the employers contribute. So this is another employee cost to the city. And you can see what we're contractually required to do, and then what the city's contribution is. So we've always done what's contractually required in contributing the employer's contribution to our employees' retirement with the state of Mississippi, or PERS. Then the employee payroll, it's what the city spends annually, if I understand that correctly. And then the contributions, or percent of payroll. So the city's contribution, $30,334,000 in fiscal year 22, divided by the employee's payroll, which is $30 million, yields 17.4%. So in a nutshell, the city contributes 17.4% to PERS annually for our employees' retirement. And if I recall correctly, I may not, but I believe the employer, city's contribution, is going to increase by 0.5% for each of the next 4 years. Did I understand that correctly? So that 17.4% that the city contributes, 4 years from now, that's going to be at 19.4%, and it could go up even higher. So again, the city right now bears that increased cost, which will come out of the general fund pretty much when we apportion it. Don't know anything about the employee contributions. That's set by the PERS board and the legislature, recommended now by the PERS board. The state legislature, as I understand it, has to approve that now. So that covers PERS. And again, most employees don't think about that, but it's a cost that the city bears. Then this is one of those curiosity things. The next handout is vehicle costs over time. And I tried, these are not the only vehicles we've bought, but what I tried to do is find certain makes and models over the years that were similar. I don't know how similar. But for example, in 2018, that top line, we're looking at a Dodge truck, a Ram Dodge truck, cost you $19,000, almost $19,700. And then if you go down about 7 or 8 or 9 from the bottom, a 2023 Dodge truck, Dodge Ram 1500, it's now $36,275. So again, this is a good frame of reference. As the years go by, we're having to pay more for vehicles, which is eating through our general fund. Now, the general fund, if we're looking at trying to look at employee pay, the more money we have in our general fund when we take care of those things we have to take care of, then the more money is left for employee pay increases. All right, the next page. And this is this document just compares the tax levy, Mayor Levy, Dr. Millage here. There you go. So you see the years, the most recent year at the top, and I went back to 1993, and you can see how long Biloxi's tax levy or millage has been since 2001. But I want to start at the very bottom. You see the 1993, the city's millage was 59.06. And you recall what happened in 1992, right? Yeah, gaming rolled in. So it took up, and that's when gaming was approved, if I recall. Hancock had already approved it, and Biloxi had a second vote on it. It was approved the second go around. But you could see that in 1995, the millage was reduced. In 1996, it was increased. I don't know why, but it was increased a little less than a mil. And then it was dropped in 97, dropped in 98. And look, from 98 to 99, dropped from 52 to 47, roughly, almost 53 to 40, about 5 mils. And then 2000, it dropped another mil. And it must have been a really good year in 2000. Because the millage dropped, what's that, a little more than a third, and it's been there ever since. And I'll mention this, people always wonder where the gaming revenue went. I just want to point out, just looking at the millage, the tax levy, since gaming rolled in, your tax rate or tax levy is half of what it was before gaming was here. So that's a big chunk. So, what did the casinos do for you? Pretty much have kept your taxes low because of the revenue they've generated. Again, in the previous handout, I had the big three.
It took a while for those riverboats to expand to what they morphed into today.
It did, but gaming and sales tax, that's accounted for most of the reduction in millage, but then that's economic dependent. If it's a tight year for everybody, people don't travel. We see less people gaming. We see less people spending money. So
think about it too, Paul. When they first started gaming, there wasn't much of anything here.
Oh, I know.
So you only had a couple of riverboats, and ever since it's been increasing. And now they put the barges in, now they put them on land. So, and then the sport betting has made one huge difference.
Right.
So that's where. And
gaming.
when I got elected, we dropped that tax base to 30. It's been there ever since.
Right. And we
Barbara Dodge built a $1 billion facility, I believe, around 2000 also. So.
Thank you for waiting patiently, Mr. Mayor, and raising your hand. I'm reverting here to
in looking at what we've been from a revenue and a gaming revenue, the whole picture is what a person pays in Biloxi. Of course, the millage it's kind of deceiving here because you pay the city millage, you pay the county millage, and you pay school district millage. And we're significantly below the rest of them when you can take all of those in consideration. But along with, as George was saying, the dollars related to gross gaming revenue, up until 21, the record was 903 million GGR in 2004. So we've been, kind of managing the ball game. Again, reflecting on what we budgeted this year in gaming revenue, we put 23 million, I think, in that our share of GGR in the general fund. 3 years in a row, record, 21, 22, and 23 now. And we're doing okay. But, we're offsetting that gross gaming revenue figure to share the expenses employee as well as other things.
Right.
So
GGR for the benefit of those who aren't.
gross gaming revenue, right?
Gross gaming revenue.
So, in between 2004, which 2005 hit and boom, and then 2019 and boom, and 2021, when in the middle of the pandemic, I think we got hit with about 9 million in really real revenue, but we were able to, but last 3 years, gross, records, and $1 billion plus in GGR, what we're planning, that generates the numbers that we're talking about here.
Right.
We're doing okay. I've got some year-to-date figures, and maybe on our next workshop we can go in. I understand what we're trying to do generally and what we can afford to do specifically. So, in looking at, we're facing, a bump of that percentage in employee cost, as well as filling and keeping the employees we have. That's the whole, I think, purpose in what we're beginning this exercise to do. So what can we do? If you divide it in quadrants, what can we do realistically? We're short in a number of ways. The vacancies, the most critical is we're chief. We've got to retain our 138 sworn folks. And we know generally what it's going to take to be competitive across the state. And again, when it comes to public works and public, utilities, we know what we got to do just to keep up with our neighbors. And I think somewhere in between, we'll generate what we've got to do, whether it's,
Well, we've got to grow the revenue. I mean,
that's right.
We got
Either
to
you're
grow
going to reduce, you're right, it goes to the bottom line. Either you reduce your expenditures or increase your revenues in order to take care of those employees that we want to, that we have to, keep enthused and engaged for City of Biloxi. So it's what, I'm sure there'll be a balance of, can we reduce some expenditures here? We've talked all the easy ones, maybe capital, maybe even if we have to do it for 2 years or 3 years at a reduced pace, but it all, spreads to where this is where we need to be in a 5-year plan and have the employees we need in order to do the job we need to do.
Right.
That's it.
Well, if you go back to or if we're still looking at the comparison of tax levy or millage, at the very bottom, in the lower left corner, you see the date that was updated, but above that, you see a link. And if you were to go and look, they have cities listed for the last, 8 or 10 years or whatever. And then they also have the counties. And if you look at the county millage, I mean, as best I could determine, this is what the millage for Harrison County, for example, if you live in Biloxi. I'm not sure if that's exactly right, because the total millage that the county levies is like 102 mills, I think. I think that's for everything. They've got different school districts. They've got a number of fire districts, all that stuff. So it's just, that can be very confusing. I don't profess to know if I've done this correctly, but when it comes to the counties, I've looked at, I think I've got an accurate figure in there. So I didn't include schools, but you can find school districts on the Department of Revenue site, which is that link. If you explore that, you can find that if you're interested in that kind of stuff. The last handout is just the current compensation schedule here. We typically referred to as pay bands that were adopted a little over a year ago on January 3rd, 2023. And we reduced the number of, I guess, the position titles. 'Cause I think originally we had like 600 employees and like, I'm exaggerating here, I may not be like 400 titles or something, because over the years, if there was a job that was created, good, but we had hybrid jobs, all kind of stuff. I sent an email to the Stennis Institute of Government. They're associated with Mississippi State University, and they will do compensation studies, and they will, I've asked them just to give me a ballpark figure and basically what that would consist of. Just, it might be worth pursuing and looking at this, and here are some concerns that I have. If it's just a straight across the board increase of 3%, whatever that is, 2%, 9%, whatever it might be, my concern there is, in just looking at law enforcement, number A, we're not competing very effectively with some of our municipality neighbors. Folks are leaving us because of that. We're in a little better shape with the fire department, but even there are some positions where we need to be more competitive. That's just those two departments. And then I'm thinking, I don't know exactly without looking at the pay band, but if I start as an administrative assistant or a secretary, working in air-conditioned comfort, the sound of a phone, typing, data entry or whatever, compared to, I think Mr. Lawrence pointed this out, if you're outside working in the weather for parks or recreation and you're being paid what they're being paid, we got to have workers to do what Public Works has to do. We need, that's all labor intensive, as is parks and recreation. So there are a number of factors here to consider. So I'm not wild about, we're just looking at a straight percentage across the board. It's easy to do, but if we were to look at, just pick a number, 3%, 4% or whatever, that doesn't help us. That really doesn't move the needle much in law enforcement. And for some positions in the fire department, it doesn't move the needle much. And if you're on the low end of the pay scale, it doesn't move the needle much. The other thing was, I was talking with somebody at the Biloxi Housing Authority. I was talking with Helen Werby, and she knows everything about affordable income and what's available and vouchers and all that stuff. And, it's tough for somebody, if a husband and wife have been working in the city of Biloxi, depending on their positions, of course, for a number of years, they have a tough time renting, much less buying a place. Everybody's having a tough time buying a place. Nobody wants to give up what they have to buy something new for a higher interest rate. And it's not our responsibility to see that everybody owns a house if they work for the city of Biloxi. But still, what do we need to do in terms of compensation to make Biloxi an attractive place to work? Because we're competing with a lot of these other folks. I'm particularly concerned because it's gone on for a number of years now in law enforcement. And some folks are retiring. A lot of experience walks out the door. There's some training time involved. But then some folks have left us to go to a neighboring city. And which triggered another thought, forgive me, another stray electron, and that is the Fair Labor Standards Act and who's exempt and who's not exempt. I know there's some discussion about that in Congress now, and I think they update all those requirements periodically.
Hey, Paul, I'd like to ask a question, because last time you brought it up, you said it was 646 employees, and Buffalo said it was 606. That's a big difference, 40 people. So how many employees the city actually have? I mean, it's working full-time.
Yeah, I think 606, something like that.
I think that might have been, no, I don't think I've given you that yet, but
That was made a statement at the meeting.
right. But I've talked with the mayor, and he's got he runs a little routine, and he can print out something that I think gives us an accurate number on who's employed where and what vacancies we have, which is terrific. But part of what makes this difficult to track over the years, because I'm really interested in the historical aspect, of we employing more people, less people, whatever, and that used to be included in, I guess, one of the schedules in the comprehensive annual financial report, but they no longer do that. I can't find those numbers anywhere. Maybe you can. I don't recall.
My department.
But I mean, with, as many computers and computer whizzes as we have in city government, somebody ought to be able to push a button or two and spit out the numbers on any given day. But what would also be interesting is to look at how many people are eligible for retirement. And then as we track people that leave us, typically, how long do they stay? When do they leave us? And we need to be making plans,
Today, you have 5 of them left the police department.
Right.
Yeah, that I know of, that he said.
Let me jump in, especially when it comes to PD and public safety. We made some moves 2 years ago that put us in a much better position, I think. And what has happened last year, in October of last year, they were reacting to what we did. Is that not right? Because we placed, I think, 52-3 was our bump 2 years ago to a third class patrolman, I think, and then we were a few thousand in front of everybody else. But in this past year, so they had to suck down that 21 and 22, and then 23, they came on top of us, and that's where we're, I think, in trying to derive a mode to be on top, just the raw dollars, not talking about some of the benefits and everything. So I think we're in a reaction mode to that, and we should be, because we want to have not 15 vacancies, but people stacked up ready to come to work for Biloxi. And that's one of the intent of what I'm researching and what we're researching together, where we need to be competitively when it comes to police and fire, and when it comes to utilities, because that's a different set of situations that we have to address. I think the last hit 2 years ago, we went the lowest. Was 12 an hour, and I think 13.65 is the lowest now.
Yeah,
Chief,
12.50.
Before you get started, let me just make a statement. Most of us have been up here over a decade, and we understand the dynamics, of pay raises, compensation. We know the dynamics of it. It's coming to a head over the last couple of years. It's coming to a head. We're trying to get there. And I appreciate Dr. Tisdale's bevy of data and material. It's important that we have these numbers and statistics, and I applaud Dr. Tisdale for gathering it and putting it all together. But, in a nutshell, and one of my colleagues a couple of years ago stated this, I'm going to restate it. Number one, law enforcement, police department, we have to take care of that first. We know what we know who is going to be competitive for our workforce, and we need to make sure that from a compensation standpoint, that isn't the issue, number one. Number two, the fire department, I think, is next, or 1A, 1B, however you want to call it, and we have to do the same thing with those guys to make sure that we're compensating them. And number three is public works. I'm going to just restate it. They work outside. We talked up here, we led with grass cutting. We have got to have a good public works department in place, staffed, organized, and ready to go, and rotating those calendars on what they maintain. That's where it starts with those big three. Now, I don't want to discount any of the other departments. I really don't. But I think we got to solve that problem first with the revenues that we have coming in. We've already had increases in insurance, PERS, as we mentioned up here, and other compensation and other expenses. Even though you see those revenues increasing, you certainly see our expenses increasing. Does it warrant a millage increase? I don't know. We should have a leadership acuity to be able to make the round, fit the square peg in a round hole for that cliche. But I think this workshop, that's what I'm trying to get out of it. Cut through the chase, cut through all this. We need this data, but let's go attack it right where it needs to be attacked, Mayor. And I know you've looked at it for a decade, just like all of us, and let's go attack it and solve that problem. And then when we put the budget together, we got to make those hard decisions, like the mayor said, whether it's capital projects or whether it's other other expenses.
you
And I'll
think
leave it there for right now.
Yeah, well, like I said, I'm shooting from the hip here and bringing up some things we brought up a little while ago. He supports not only 50,000 people, but another 50,000 visitors on the weekend. Okay, and that support costs us money. That was one of the reasons we came up with this 2% ask of that in order to do the special events tourism. I mean, if you look at half the week, what it takes to support those tourism that come in, that's all justified in what we need to do. So it's my intent. It's either two things: you reduce expenses or raise revenues. It'd be a combination of both. So it's my intent to revisit that, to help the visitors that the tourism that we support offset. How many special events do you do a year? The last one was $100-something plus $1,000 just for what was done, and that's not really considered across the board. But we need to ask where we can ask, and it's my intention to visit everybody we need to visit between now and next time to look at an opportunity to put some additional funds in there so we can implement what it's going to take to do both things, keep it safe, friendly, and beautiful. That's my total intent.
Well, and I'm thinking we're trying to knock out the insurance piece, so we have a cost that we can plug, because we were late getting out of the box on that. We're looking to reduce some costs there. What was the other thing? Insurance.
We'll find out more tomorrow when we meet with Si.
Yeah, but the other thing is, I would hope that we would approach the issue this way. Where would you like to see the city of Biloxi? Where would we perform? What services we would provide on a regular basis? Another way to ask that is, how good do you want to be? Okay, so if we want to be this good, then the next question is, well, where are we now? Are we here? Are we here? But whatever it is, I don't think we're here yet, but we got to close that gap somehow. And we've got to figure out how to close that gap.
That's it right there. That's the name. Just what Kenny was saying and you said, that's what we got to look at.
Well,
How do we get to the level we need to be at and what it's going to cost?
so,
Simple.
the other thing, I've seen a lot of comments on social media now about the condition of parks and everything. Well, you can only do so much with what you have. We can't do everything for everybody. But I think we need to have clear plans. We need to know exactly where we're going to spend our money. If we're going to grow revenue, what are we going to grow? If we're going to cut expenditures, then what expenses or what services are going to be reduced or impacted so that the citizens understand that. The other thing is, bear with me, Chief. Sure. The other thing is, if I'm an employee for the city of Biloxi, I never know when my next pay raise is coming. I don't. It could be a year, could be 2 years. It's been a number of years in some instances before we were here, and 3 or 4 years sometimes while we were here. And I think that's part of the reason why we lost so much ground over time. But the other thing is, I appreciate the business models and the revenue that's generated that helps keep the millage down from visitors, but we've got to figure out a way to generate more revenue. And the first example that comes to mind, it was going to be Bay Vista water lines, but that's being addressed. But then it's Edgewater Estates water lines, for example. And we've got the West Biloxi, and that's just, I don't know, maybe physically a third of the city. And just alone right there, that's about $200 or $180 million now, and every day the price of everything is going up, as Walt Rody could attest to, as you know, from these projects that we're bidding out. So it's a formidable task, but I don't think we can continue to do what we're doing, because we just seem to, we can no longer be competitive as we want to be, or offer the services, or improve the quality of life for our residents. And that's not a knock on the mayor, that's a knock on, that's just where we find ourselves. So, how are we going to grow revenue? And I will broach this topic of ad valorem or property tax, because we've not had a millage increase in a number of years. And B, I've talked with people, and when I talk about a millage increase, most folks would say, if I know where it's going, and, you know, if I'm into parks or I want my road paved or whatever, then most say I could pay a little more each month, and it's not everybody. But also I think it's hard to say when we can repair your road sometimes if we don't have enough revenue or we're juggling revenue to try and meet the greatest needs. It puts us in a position where we're more reactive than proactive. So I'll just hush for a moment. Chief, go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple of things to kind of paint a better picture. You know, for years, we enjoyed a police department that was a little better paid than anybody else around us. And we had officers that stayed here 25, 30 plus years. And we're not enjoying that anymore. For one reason, we have a younger police force now, and nationwide, people aren't getting into this business. So what's happening is all the cities around us are competing for the exact same policeman. That's what's happening. A young policeman's going to go wherever they're paid the most. That's what, and you know, I mean, it stands to reason. That's what they're going to do. That's one of the reasons that we're kind of in the boat that we're in now. But just this morning, I got word that we're probably going to lose one of our young patrolmen to D'Iberville. And the pay is about the same, insurance is about the same, but he'd be working probably half the overtime hours that they're working now.
Right. Chief, how many weekends typically? It was like half the weekends, or is it more than that? And we're talking all the sworn officers, right, are working at least half their weekends.
Oh, yeah, that's still
Maybe
in
more
place.
than that, right.
That's still in place, and money would soothe some of that, you know, but again, you just have to keep in mind that there's not enough officers to go around, and they're going to go wherever they're paid the highest. That's the only, that's how it's going to be. I don't know how much longer it's going to be that way, but this is unlike some of the other departments. I know some of them have a high turnover, but they can still hire people. We just can't seem to hire anybody, and it's not just us. It's nationwide.
Right.
So we really, for right around us right now, we're nowhere near the highest paid just around the coast area. Right. We've lost some to Ocean Springs, we've lost some to Gaucher. I know we're going to lose some to D'Iberville, and once they're gone, it's very difficult to get them to come back.
Any other comments or observations?
The last comment I'm going to tell the Popo, I think it's time to put out the little breakdown of the scale, how much money the city actually keeps from them taxes of the gaming. Everybody think we get all that money. We don't get but a small percent. And then, right, when you break it down, and they don't realize it goes to the county, the state, everybody else gets all this money. The city of Biloxi only receives a small portion of that. And then you gotta put that scale back out, it's broke down. Remember, there's like 7, 8 of them, each county gets so much, school district gets so much, you know. So we don't receive to put
Perception, yeah, the
$50
perception.
million in our general fund. We don't get that kind of money. They think we do. So that needs to be put in the mail, just that little scale, how much money percentage-wise that each person gets from that gaming tax.
Absolutely.
Councilman, the one thing that jumps out at me, if the mayor doesn't kick me under the table here, is if just last 3 years, we spent more than we took in. Right, that's the takeaway of all this data to me, is we can't live in that way, taking in less money than we're spending. And to add something to what the police was just talking about is the reason we're not retaining police doesn't have to do, it does have something to do with the pay, but we have to man up here and say no to some of these events. I mean, every weekend, somebody's got a race that's, oh, okay, it only takes two officers extra. Somebody's got another 3-mile race. Oh, no, it takes two officers. But we never say no. Let them go somewhere else.
Well, but that's why we have the special event ordinance that permits us to say no,
That's right.
given
But
some of the circumstances. This was the first year we've done that, but folks are going to, follow that application process, or they won't be able to have those special events, and then they've got to comply with some of the requirements And some didn't do that this last year, but I think as folks learn how to complete the application process, then we've got to make some educated decisions. And again, if we don't have the personnel, and that's part of the application, if we don't have the personnel, and whoever's putting on the event they already have to have a security plan. They've got to have a parking, all this other stuff that involves some expenses. That's on them. It's not necessarily on the city, but time will tell there. But that's a good point. Mr. Shoemaker, do you have any
Yeah,
comments?
just a couple things. I know we've been here for a while, but I'm 100% behind that as well. If we don't have the manpower to work an event, maybe we need to just not approve all the events. I have to agree with what y'all said earlier. Police, 100%. We know we're down police. We got to have police. Fire, I don't know the numbers on the fire, but I'm sure the fire department's down as well. And every employee in the city, everybody needs a pay raise. And I mean, hands down, and I don't know what we're going to be able to do, but I know, and I mentioned this earlier, but Public Works, Parks and Rec, and look, there's a whole lot of other, one of y'all, I think you, Mr. Tisdale mentioned it, or George, the outside employees. If you look on this list, not a majority, quite a few of the lowest paid in the city are gonna be the outside people working. And it is hot, it's hard work, and we can't get them for what we're paying now. And we're losing them. We're losing supervisors to D'Iberville. And so at some point, I mean, the common theme is we have a lot of people leaving the city, employees going to other cities, and D'Iberville's getting a lot of them. So at some point, I know we have to have the money, obviously, but we have to figure something out. And even if we give, just throwing a number out for the sake of an easy number, 5% to an employee making $50,000 and 5% to an employee making $26,000 is a huge difference. Now, I get it, it's 5% for everybody, but again, the positions that are getting paid the least amount are some of the hardest working positions, not taking anything from any other employees or any other people working inside. I don't mean it that way. It's just they're the ones that are outside, and that is hot, it's cold, it's wet, it's raining, and we're paying those guys, and I understand that. But at some point, they're gonna have to come up. We're never gonna hire people, especially in those positions. If we can't hire policemen and firemen and clerks and everybody else, we're certainly not gonna hire people to work outside for what we're paying. I'm new to this, and a lot of these numbers are unbelievable. I didn't know we were paying this low on some of them, and I know we have to have money, we have to cut things and bring money in, and I won't beat a dead horse, but it's just, we have to, those guys outside, and I'm telling you, they're absolutely understaffed. I've learned this recently in Ward 7, so I can imagine everywhere in Biloxi, they're understaffed, overworked, and way underpaid, and I don't think any of that is gonna change, even with the police, the fire, and the other positions. So that's really all I wanted to say, that if we can do something for all employees too, we just need to look at that, and that's all I have.
If there are no other comments or observations,
Let me
Mr.
kind
Mayor?
of say that, we're gonna be hot and heavy into this whole thing in about 4 or 5 weeks. And it's, if you want to revisit this in 4 weeks again, we'll come up with, some thoughts along David's line on what we need the most, the mostest with the fastest, and the fastest with the mostest. And again, there's been a little bit of a bump that we took across the board, or increase with regard to longevity. So a little bit of that has been self-corrected as a basis for a lawsuit that we were in the middle of. But I'll come up with a scenario. I mean, nothing, that we need to kind of put it together, and it'd be a combination of a lot of things. But, it needs to be done. I can assure you that we need to, employees make you money.
So just as soon as we can get that done, you're right, we need to get it done and put something on the table.
Yeah, because it's gonna be hot and heavy, and again, the personnel services is 63% of the ball game. Is what we pay these folks.
could we meet then, June? We've got the MML conference here the last week in June. But how about we meet again have another budget workshop, June 18th? That's a third Tuesday. That'll be our last meeting of the month. We could do it following the council meeting then.
That's
Yeah,
fine.
we're gonna be in budget.
Yeah, we gotta be ready. We get ready to go into budget time.
Go ahead, Carrie, what? I'm sorry, I'm talking about employee pay raise, another employee pay workshop.
Combine it.
Well, we end up talking about the budget anyway, but that needs to be the focus. And Mayor, if you're able to have something there preliminarily, just so
Yeah,
we can
well,
start looking at, we need to get something down, look at it, tweak it if we gotta tweak it,
Well,
massage it, whatever.
and to be straight with everybody, and we have taken those opportunities to adjust some of those folks we were actually going to lose to somebody if we didn't take care of it. So what I want to do is glean down where we are and what we've taken care of, and some of the people who are just sitting there. You know, like I said, the $13.65 an hour. 13.65, as well as, police, from the police end. So I'll have a hybrid, if you will, a play that I think needs to be made, and the bottom line that it takes. The revenue it's going to take to sustain that, not this year, but 5 years, and how we're going to play, revenues and, capital and some of these other big, even non-departmental. I mean, if you could squeeze $1 million out of that some kind of way, even though it's really hard, what would you rather have? Less equipment or more people?
You gonna be here in 5 years?
I hope to.
I didn't want to leave that question out there lingering.
Yeah,
Okay.
Those of y'all, but anyway, no, that's the deal.
Okay, well, if you have something to show us, we can start
Yeah.
working on it. We'll shoot for June 18th. George, another comment?
But no. I said,
Yeah,
really.
let me say too before I left. Our Diana and the team has probably put together really where we are right this very second, and and let me keep in mind, we recorded or budgeted record revenues in each place. In each one. I don't think we can record more revenue of the same nature. So 3 years in a row, gaming revenue, 23 million as far as general fund. Maybe something will grow.
Well-
we don't know, with regard to what's going to roll out, which is a 3-year down the road. It may be in excess of $1 billion that really makes a difference on what we're planning on. But we will make it very apparent when we talk about record GGR, where that means record for the state, record for the county, record for the schools, and it's not just us.
Right, just bring all that to us, that's what we
And
need.
we'll make it very apparent.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Second by Mr. Glavin. Any other discussion? All in favor? That's 1, 2, 3, and then there were 4. Okay. Thank you all.